Sir?
We, as Americans, have declared a war on terrorism. The most difficult aspect of this war is identifying and locating our enemies. Fighting the war on terrorism is not as simple as finding one man and bringing him to justice. Terrorism is not a person, or a people for that matter. It's a state of mind. We all realize that this war is so very different from any other war because we're not fighting a specific person in a specific place. After the nation of Israel crossed over the Jordan River into the Promised Land, they came upon one of the most fortified cities of their time, the city of Jericho. The great walls of the city made it a fortress that was impossible for the Israelites to penetrate in their own power. Jericho is not a large city in terms of land dimensions. It only covered about 8 acres, but it was a city surrounded by 2 enormous walls, 15 feet apart. Each wall was lined with soldiers, and watchmen stood at every gate. In Philippians 4:13 it says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." God's will was to deliver the people of Israel into the city of Jericho. But first, they had to follow God's leadership to victory. On a more personal level, our enemies might be better described as obstacles. Sometimes the obstacle we face is running short on money, or it might be a person you go to school or work with that is constantly holding you back. We all face obstacles of some sort or another. Whether it's a war with terrorism or just personal finances, we sometimes find ourselves with the odds stacked against us. So many times when we face impossible situations in our lives, we say that there's no way. There's always a way when God is involved. If you would have been at the crucifixion, you wouldn't have believed that Jesus would have been able to be walking and talking and teaching his disciples only 3 days later. We often fail to view our obstacles as an opportunity for God to demonstrate his power. God can turn our gloom into gladness. What about when the disciples were making their way to the tomb on Sunday morning after the crucifixion? Do you think they were filled with gloom? Of course they were. What happened on Saturday, the day between the crucifixion and the resurrection? What a gloomy day that must have been. But on Sunday morning, God turned our gloom into gladness. We cannot modify God's instructions and still succeed. What if Joshua would have added to the Lord's plans? What if he would have had the archers shot over the wall as they marched around the city? I mean, at least they would have been doing something offensive. Some sort of military force would be applied. Or maybe he could let part of the people march around the city while the other part worked on breaking down the gates or climbing over the walls. We know that's ridiculous, don't we? But don't we do the same things? We do things that we know are wrong, and we justify our actions by making excuses. We jump into sin and turn to others around us and tell them they just don't understand. Have you ever thought what would have happened if Noah would have modified the plans God made for the ark? What if Noah tried to make the ark a little more aerodynamic? Scientists have scaled down the measurements God gave to Noah and built a replica of the ark. When they placed it in the water to see if it would turn over, they discovered it was nearly impossible. Imagine that you're at a Spanish club, and the Spanish teacher has decided to go to Mexico. So he says to you, "Look, I'm going to leave, and while I'm gone, I want you to take care of this. You manage things while I'm away. I'll email you regularly. When I do, I'll instruct you on what you should do from now until I come back." Everyone agrees. He goes away for a couple of weeks. During that time, he writes often, communicating his desires and concerns. Finally, he returns. He walks into his first meeting back and discovers everything is in a mess. Spanish textbooks being used to prop up the legs that had been broken off his desk, lights flickering on and off, soda covering the floor. Without hesitation, he calls everyone together and asks, "What happened? Didn't you get my emails?" You say, "Oh yeah, sure, we got all of them. We've even bound them in a book, and some of us have memorized them. In fact, we even have a letter study every Sunday. You know, those were really great letters." I think the teacher would then ask, "But what did you do with my instructions?" And no doubt the students would respond, "Do? Well, they sounded so strict, so we just sort of followed them. We just thought they were really great letters. We didn't know we were supposed to do anything with them. But we did read every one." Don't we do the same thing? We often think that we can do something our own way and it will all work out. But we cannot modify God's instructions and still succeed. The philosophy final at UCLA had many blank pages for the answer to one simple question. What is courage? And now most of the students wrote frantically, giving examples, expounding upon theories, writing pages upon pages of notes. But one student turned in his essay with just 2 simple words to describe what he thought courage was. He wrote, "This is," and he received an A. And now, with all due respect to that student from UCLA, Courage is far more than a clever response on a college exam. That student took a chance. He took a risk. He gambled that his cute answer would get him the teacher's attention and approval. And now in this case, he was right. But true courage goes far deeper than merely guessing what we can get by on witty statements and creative behavior. One poet wrote, "Courage is an independent spark from heaven's bright throne, by which the soul stands raised, triumphant, high, alone." So, in other words, courage is the result of faith. It's a faith in a just cause or an ideal or in the will of God. But this kind of faith, a faith that is the true basis of courage, is often the type of faith that requires us to stand alone. And throughout the Bible, we're told of many stories of people who did exactly that. One poet wrote, "Noah built the ark and voyaged alone. His neighbors laughed at his strangeness and perished in style. Abraham wandered and worshipped alone. Sodomites smiled at the simple shepherd, followed the fashion, and fed the flames. Daniel dined and prayed alone. Elijah sacrificed and witnessed alone. Jeremiah witnessed and wept alone. Jesus loved and died alone." But why did all these people have to go alone? Well, the general rule of most people is they'd rather not. They'd rather not go alone. In fact, they'd just as soon leave well enough alone. They'd rather not rock the boat. They'd rather not be seen as judgmental. They'd rather just live and let live. But sometimes belonging to Christ requires us to go against the grain. It sometimes calls us to call sin, sin. It sometimes requires us to stand up for God's truth, even when others tell us to sit down and be quiet. Or as Dr. Adrian Rogers once said, "Faith is not believing in God in spite of the evidence. Faith is obeying God in spite of the consequences." Now that brings us to John the Baptist. What happened to John wasn't right. John had been standing up for God's righteousness. He was leading people to repentance and baptism. He was standing alone. But he pushed one couple too far, and they pushed back. We're told that Herod Antipas, the ruler of Palestine at the time, had married Herodias, his brother's wife. And now since Herod was the ruler of God's people at the time, he was therefore under the law of God. And what he was doing was directly prohibited in Leviticus. So essentially, he was disobeying a direct command from God. His marriage to Herodias was an abomination. It was a sin. It would lead them to childlessness and eventually to hell. So John the Baptist, being a good prophet, decides to confront Herod and Herodias. And we're told in Matthew that Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Matthew 14:3-4. So obviously we've got a couple of pretty upset people here. Eventually all this anger boils up, and John ends up dying at her command. And now the question comes to mind, why did John the Baptist push them so hard? Why not just live and let live? Why would he rock the boat? Why would he be so judgmental? Why not just leave well enough alone? But John didn't do that. The Greek in Matthew and Mark seems to indicate John repeatedly confronted Herod and Herodias. Literally, John kept on saying to them, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Kind of reminds me of those people on Animal Planet who have the big 10-foot long snakes that hold them right up to their face, looking right in the camera and say, this is a poisonous snake. Don't do this at home. So it's little wonder John got bit. John had faith in the power of God to change people's lives. And because he had this faith, he had the power and courage to confront Herod and Herodias in hopes of God reaching down into their very hearts and turning them around. Even when John felt completely alone. And now that poet I quoted earlier talked about Abraham and Noah, Elijah and everyone else being completely alone. That poet was forgetting one tremendous factor. That poet was forgetting God. No one has to be alone if they have faith in him. Even when we feel completely abandoned, God will be there, if we have faith in him, waiting to give us the victory.